Hey everybody, and thank you for joining us for 5 Minutes in the Word. Yesterday we were talking about the creation account. We talked about Adam, we talked about Eve, and we got into the story talking about how Adam and Eve were there in the midst of this perfect garden, and they took of that fruit that God told them not to eat. They took of it and they sinned before God. But I want to dive a little bit, more into this story and to pull something out of it, because they didn't just sin here in this account. There's a lot more to it. So, Mr. Gary, can you help us today? What are some more things that we can draw out of this that can point us as we continue on in this story?
Well, one thing that I think we've got to notice is that when God said, "Don't eat of this fruit," that He was pretty emphatic.
He was.
He said, "In the day you eat thereof, you will die." But now all of us have read the next chapter.
Right.
You've already talked a little bit about it. They did eat,
right.
Both of them, not just the man or not just the woman. They both ate, but I don't see them dying.
No, they didn't. At least not in the way that we think about.
No. So I've heard it explained different ways, but the reality is that the terminology he uses here means a violent, punishing death. This is like our capital punishment.
So what's he talking about here then?
Well, that's a good point. I think he's really talking about capital punishment.
Okay.
I think that's really what we're dealing with. So how does God solve that is what the big question becomes.
Okay.
What does he do with it? Because he doesn't kill them.
No.
And yet God is consistent.
He is.
He doesn't, if he says something, there's going to have to be some way to deal with that.
Well, and there was definite punishment that was coming. So tell us a little bit. What was that punishment?
Okay, death, but watch what he does.
Right.
Because really, both man and woman, who've not been created, so far as we know, all that long, even if it was years, it's still not that long compared to the life of the earth.
No.
They don't die. At least not here.
Right.
They eventually die, but they don't die that execution type death. So God, as he begins to deal with man, first of all gets man to recognize his sin.
He does.
Because, who told you don't have any clothes on?
Right. I mean, they were trying to hide from God.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And who told you that? Because before, as you end chapter 2, they're naked, but they're perfectly innocent, like a little bitty baby running around after its bath, with no clothes on. They're just like that. But now all of a sudden they're embarrassed.
They are.
And so God makes man acknowledge. Now, good old man, he functions like all the rest of us, I guess. A lot of us, I'll put it that way. He doesn't quite want to take responsibility, so he says, it's the woman's fault.
Right.
And by the way, in the process, he says,
it's your fault.
Yeah, because it's the woman you gave me.
Right.
I wouldn't have done this if it hadn't been for that woman you gave me. And the woman does the same thing.
She does.
She looks at the serpent, and I've often wondered, do you suppose the serpent looked around for somebody else to blame? I don't know, but he doesn't have anybody else to blame.
Right.
So then God begins to issue to each of them his punishment. And it's in the process of talking to the serpent that he makes a pretty powerful statement. This is Genesis 3:15. And I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
He?
Yeah, he. This is God saying, okay, somebody's got to die.
Right.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm giving my son.
So all the way back here in Genesis, in this fall of man, we have the Christ. We have the Messiah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an amazing thing to see.
It is. And you get all the way over to Galatians, and the Apostle Paul in chapter 4 talks about the seed. And he is pretty emphatic. It's not seeds as of many,
right,
but seed as of one.
Wow.
And this is the one. This is Jesus. So the funny thing about God, and it's something I don't think we all understand is that when he says it's going to happen, it's as good as done.
It is.
So in Revelation, the writer actually says the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So we've got God's solution to a terrible problem. And maybe we need to look in the future at, okay, so now what happens? But for today, thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.